Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and joining our program today. I'm Christine Reeder, Adult Services Librarian, and this is our first program of our wonderful programs presented during February for Black History Month. Today, it's Authors and Their Journeys, African American Crime Writers. We are welcoming Pamela Samuels-Young, Rachel Hall, and Gary Phillips, and also Louise Bannon, who is the president of Sisters in Crime. So I would like you all to be sure that during the program you are muted and your video is off, because we have permission from the three presenters and the president of Sisters in Crime, Louise Bannon, to record. And this program will be put on the Pasadena Public Library's YouTube channel. So we will not be showing anyone's picture. So thank you very much for muting yourself.
All righty, I guess I should take it.
Right, so at this time, the president of Sisters in Crime is going to tell you about Sisters in Crime, and she would like to introduce to you to Pamela Samuels-Young, Rachel Hall, and Gary Phillips. Thank you all so much for doing this for us. But remember, before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the library.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
While our doors are closed, we are offering contactless curbside service. So you may go to our Pasadena Public Library webpage, to our catalog, select your books, put them on hold, and select where you would like to pick them up. We are open 24/7 on the web. We also have chat service during our regular open hours to answer any of your questions and help you with anything you need to know regarding the community or events that are going on. We have wonderful reference services as well. You all know how to go to our webpage and go to our off the shelf and sign up for events. So I want to encourage you to look at all the other Black History events throughout the month. There's a large selection of different authors and different programs, and we thank you for attending some of those as well. So now, Anne, I'll turn it over to you for the wonderful discussion, and I know this is going to be a great discussion today. Thank you all so much.
All right. Well, hey, thank you, Christine, for having us. We're happy to be here. This is really exciting for me. Obviously, I'm not a Black crime writer, but I am a crime writer. So I'm also the president of the Sisters in Crime Los Angeles chapter, not the whole organization. Sisters in Crime is a national, actually even an international organization that supports women in crime writing. So it doesn't matter if you are a woman or not, you can still be a sister or a mister. We have quite a few men who join. As long as you support women in crime writing, we want you. So I'm going to go right to it. I'm going to start with Pamela Samuels-Young. She is the author of two wonderful series, the Dre Thomas series, which involves Time, Anybody's Daughter, Abuse of Discretion, and her latest book, Failure to Protect, and the Vernetta Henderson series, Every Reasonable Doubt, Infirm Pursuit, Murder on the Down Low, Attorney-Client Privilege, and Lawful Deception. So Pamela, why don't you do us a favor and tell us a little bit about yourself and your latest work, Failure to Protect.
I am an ex-lawyer who I was a former journalist working in TV news at KCBS TV before I decided to go to law school. And I've always been an avid fiction writer, fiction reader, never thought I would ever write fiction. And when I joined a large corporate law firm, Melvin & Myers, I was working lots of hours, and my stress reliever was reading. And I loved John Grisham. And for several years, I would read his books and close them and say, why weren't there anybody in those books who looked like me? And I had a really interesting sexual harassment case. And for another year, I'd say, you know, I should write a book. And the morning I got up at 4 a.m. one day to try to do it, because as an associate at a small firm, a large firm, you don't have much of a life. I got up to turn this case into a book and discovered my passion without question. And that's where it started. And here I am. I have 14 books later. I'm writing full time. I retired from the practice of law in 2016. And I thought I was going to write like 2 books a year. I wrote more when I was working than I have now that I have. So still working on that. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned, I'm in Newport Coast Villas right now. I came here for a writing week. I've been here since Sunday. I've been jamming. And
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I know.
I know. It's rough. It's rough.
All right. Well, and speaking of that, I'm going to introduce our next author is Rachel Hausell-Hall. She is also fairly prolific. She's got several standalone thrillers, the latest of which is And Now She's Gone. And she's also the author of the Eloise Lou Norton detective series. So here you are. And sorry, I'm doing 2 things at once as usual. Anyway, Rachel, why don't you tell us a little bit about your most recent book?
Sure. I am actively jealous of Pamela being in a nice place to write. And that's one of the things I miss about book tour is being in a hotel room by myself with my pens and papers and everything and like Food Network on the TV. There's something about that, and I miss it so much. So enjoy. I hope you get a lot done. Think of me. Yes. So, And Now She's Gone is, I think, my ninth novel. I'm enjoying Standalone Land. It's a mix between a procedural and a domestic suspense novel in which it's the story of a new private investigator, Grayson Sykes, who gets her very first case. Her kind of warm-up case was finding a missing Chihuahua named Cheeto. But this time she gets to look for a person, a woman of Dr. Ian O'Donnell. It's his girlfriend. And the problem is, well, one, Ian's a white guy who doesn't see color. So there's some kind of microaggressions there. Worse than that, he has a dog that he loves more, I would say, than anyone, his Labradoodle named Kenny G. And then there's the point that Isabel doesn't want to be found. And so Gray is conflicted with trying to find a woman who doesn't want to be found, meanwhile, trying to keep 2 steps ahead of someone who is also looking to find a woman that she used to know named Natalie Dixon. Like most of my stories, I would say 99% of them, it's a Los Angeles story because, of course, Los Angeles is a perfect place to leave bodies, and it's a perfect place to talk about duality and starting over. Even for us natives, you can be different people in different parts of the city. I love writing this book because it did combine the very, the procedural part, which you follow a formula, but it also, once again, talks about issues and being hunted and being who you think people want you to be. So it was a fun novel, and I'm looking forward to talking about it and all the other things that comes with being, especially a Black crime writer in today's world.
Yeah. Gary Phillips is a Mr. Obviously, he is a member of our organization. He's got 18 novels, 9 comics, 50 short stories, and I'm presuming you've eaten 4,000 donuts, according to your website.
I hope not, but anyway, yeah.
Not at one time.
Not at one time.
His most recent book is, of course, Matthew Henson and the Ice Temple of Harlem, which, wow. And I'm if we get a chance, I got some questions for you on that one. Oh, by the way, I want to point out, I am putting everybody's website into the chat, and I'll be
lovely.
popping that in. Please visit the sites when you can. And hey, if you get a chance to buy a book or two, that'd be so awesome. We'd really love it. Anyway, Gary, why don't you tell us a little bit about Matthew Henson or some of your other work?
Well, I guess I'll start with a little bit how Pamela did, which is to say how I got here, and then yeah, as Rachel said too, we'll get into the particulars of our current novels. My background is I grew up in well, we call it South Central. I still call it South Central because I'm an old man. I guess it's political term now is South LA. But anyway, when I grew up there, and then I grew up reading comic books and somehow stumbled into well, in those days there was an infamous publisher called Holloway House. For some people might know about them, and Holloway House published what was their byline? It was a white-owned company, but they published the Black Experience. That's what they said. But the Black Experience or Holloway House was all about pimps and thieves and underworld characters, right? And Donald Goines and Iceberg Slim, who actually had been a pimp, who was actually a pretty good writer. Anyway, they recounted, drew on some of their infamous past, as well as in creating these wild and strange characters. And in those days, you couldn't buy Holloway House books in a bookstore. You bought Holloway House books at the Rouse Market or at the thrifty drugstore on the spinner rack. So that was kind of partly my education. Now, mind you, as Christine mentioned, my mother was a librarian, so these are books I couldn't show my mom. I was reading I was reading Native Son, and I was reading Ivanhoe. I was reading the classics, but I was also reading this stuff. and so then I suppose both those things sort of collided in my head, and then sort of to I guess finish it out. I for quite some years I was both I was a community organizer. I was a union representative for labor union. I worked in nonprofits, particularly bringing this story up to more current times. Post the 92 civil unrest or Rodney King riots, or however you want to term that time period. As I said, but I've been reading mystery novels all this time and reading all this other stuff all this time. And so finally, when events happened in 92, and I've been thinking about writing a book. I had tried. That's not quite true. I had previously written a novel which never got published, but I finished it. Right, I finished it. And you learn something from that experience. And so then the events of 92 happened, and I thought, well, I'm pretty familiar with this, and I know about some of the folks in the gang truce, and I know some of the folks on sort of both sides of the equation, as well as in some of the people in Rebuild LA, because the organization I was part of, the nonprofit I was part of, some of the folks who ran that, who were on my board, were also on the Rebuild LA board. So anyway, all that to say is that I had some great kind of working knowledge of all sort of the various players and levels. And I thought, well, okay, why don't I set my mystery in the context of that? And that became my first book, or the first book to be published, Violent Spring. And it's kind of more of a politically charged mystery. And I specifically created a private eye character, Ivan Monk, who has now appeared in 4 novels and various short stories, and I'm probably going to eventually get around to writing the 5th, what's the word, penultimate Ivan Monk novel at some point. Because, when I started out, Monk and I were the same age. It's kind of like, how Mickey Spillane started out and Mike Hammer was the same age, and then you get old, and then you figure out, well, your character can't really take a beating like you put him through in the books, because you're an old man, you'll die. So I've slowed Monk's age down. At least in my head, I've slowed his age down. So anyway, so I'll get all back to that. And so from Monk, then I wrote some other books and a couple other series characters. Martha Cheney, I wrote 2 books about her, kind of this underworld outlaw character in Vegas. Cold Cash Courier. Nate Hollis, who is younger than Monk, but he's also private eye. And Nate Hollis actually started in comics and now has migrated to prose. And so all that then resulted in the new book, Matthew Henson, The Ice Temple of Harlem, which is a kind of retro pulp tale set in 1928. So it's still the time of the Harlem Renaissance. The great Crash has not happened, until 29. And I've taken the real life character of Matthew Henson, and hopefully, even though I've made him much larger than life, I hope that I've given him a bit of recognition that the real Matthew Henson, who was part of the North Pole expedition, didn't quite receive in reality. So anyway, that's what brought me to that project.
Can I say something real quick? Just because it's really rare when Gary and I are on one of these things together. Representation matters.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you don't see it, you can't be it. And I want to say thank you to Gary, because Gary and I met years and years and years ago when I was working as a young administrative assistant at Penn Center USA West, which is a part of Penn America Center. And he was one of the first Black genre writers I've ever met. And I didn't know that I could do that. I didn't know that you could write genre stories. It didn't have to be these, very big, important race things like Toni Morrison or Alice Walker, but they could be stories about regular Black people in Los Angeles who are in extraordinary circumstances. And I didn't know that could be until I met Gary. And I want to say thank you. You probably didn't realize that I was watching everything you did. And I would not.
Well, it's a good thing you can't tell I'm blushing. That's wonderful.
I wouldn't be writing like I am today without you modeling for me. So I want to thank you to everybody who's out there. I want to thank Gary.
Oh, that's very kind. That's very kind.
For being
but of course, she's such a wonderful writer, so it's not like she learned anything from me. But anyway, it's really kind.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, you're next up on my questions, though. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you've been writing lots of the standalones. In fact, you've got more standalones than you do in your series. So, what's fun about writing a standalone, and what's fun about writing a series?
The great thing about writing a series is the character over, the course of the series life, and you don't have to, in some ways, recreate things. The more I wrote Lou, the more I found out what she'd do in certain situations. So even then, you don't know who your character is, but you know what the universe is. And that's kind of cool and comforting. What sucks about series is if people don't buy that first or second one, then your numbers, and it's all about business, your numbers for the third and fourth one suffer. And that kind of sucks and it hurts. Yeah. And so, there's so many things I want to write about. There's so many jacked up things happening around us that it's like, well, I don't want to just limit it to Lou. That's when I started looking to doing standalones. And the wonderful thing about standalones is new characters, I use the same universe. Lou and Gray are actually existing in the same universe, but she's coming from somewhere that Lou wouldn't be able to inhabit in some ways. Lou's very polished and smart and experienced. Gray is not. Miriam from They All Fall Down is a whole different character in the same Los Angeles. So it's just another chance to tell a story from a different point of view with someone who isn't as noble as, the cops or lawyers that we write. And some stories just work better with different characters.
Yeah. Gary, you are also, 9 comic books. I'm assuming that's what you're calling your graphic novels? Or how?
No, I mean, there's a distinction, but there's more than that, but it doesn't matter.
Okay. It is kind of interesting because you're not doing your own illustrations, are you?
No.
No, I didn't think so. And I was trying to look at that and figure that out. But is there a difference, besides that visual element and having to work that in, is there a difference in approaching a regular novel versus, say, a comic book or a graphic novel?
Good question.
Well, in the concept of it, there's no difference. That is to say, you come up with a character or set of characters, and you try to think about, well, what's this plot, and how do things get set in motion, right? And what are the relationships one to another? What do my main characters want? What are they hiding from each other? All the usual questions I would ask, or that we ask when we're plotting a piece of prose, a work of prose, is the same question you ask when you're figuring out a comic. At least I ask that because generally speaking, I've been writing, I guess, crime comics. Occasionally, I've done a little bit of superhero stuff, and even for the superhero stuff, you have to ask some of those same questions. Now, where it differs, of course, is there's an economy of words that comics uses, like a film script or like a TV script, different than prose, right? And you also have to be cognizant that you're not the only one telling the story. You're working in concert with the artist to tell the story. And so when you write, page 1, panel 1, and you describe what that frozen piece of action is, that's the artist doing that, right? And so therefore you don't have to carry that. You don't have to tell the viewer, the reader, what they're seeing. They understand. We enter into a domestic living room, and two people are sitting on a couch talking. You know what I mean? So you would describe that in the book, whereas now you've described that just for the artist to show. And you know that the artist is going to show that, you don't describe that. Now you just worry about the dialogue of these two people sitting on that couch, or whatever that is, right? Whatever you want to make that, how charged you want to make that dialogue. So that's really and honestly, there's a reason that artists get paid more than writers. I mean, right? I mean, because really they're doing the hard labor, they're doing the hard work. God knows. I mean, I'd like to be like Frank Miller, who could write and draw, Sin City. And actually, that's how I became a writer. I years ago wanted to, do my own comics. Kids like guys I grew up with, we did our own comics on Flower Street, and then sadly turned out I can't draw. So anyway, I did the next best thing. So mainly you're just trying to figure out. I don't want my words to get in the way of the artist's work. But we got to work together, because sometimes you'll get a note from the artist that says, I think this will work this way, or they'll actually change things, right?
Yeah.
And because it's about pacing, or it's about how the eye moves, or it's how you're bringing him into the story. So all those things work together to hopefully, tell the story. But definitely, it's about you're certainly using an economy of words. And when you're writing a book, you've got all the real estate in the world you need, right? I mean, between you and the editor, you've got all the real estate in the world you need. When a comic book, you do not have that luxury, nor should you. It's a different medium, and it's a different way to tell the story.
Okay, Pam. A lot of your stories, we've touched on issues. I know Gary and Rachel also do issues, but your stories in particular, especially the Dre Thomas ones, deal with a lot of very tense issues. Things like Anybody's Daughter, which is child trafficking, sexting, and of course bullying and failure to protect. How do you get to which issue you're going to pick? As you're sitting there going, I'm reading something in the newspaper and going, oh my God, Dre's got to get involved in this, or what?
You know what? It never happens like that. It's always, I hear something that moves me. Anybody's Daughter, I was talking to a friend, and this was 2009 or 10. He says, the gangs are trafficking girls in LA. And I'm like, what? Begin to research it, and it's like, why isn't anybody talking about this? So that's how Anybody's Daughter came about. One of my law school classmates, just touching bases, and he's saying, I just had a difficult conversation with parents to let them know that their kid is could be facing some serious time for sexting. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He sends a picture to a classmate, and he's just distributed child pornography, even though he's a child. And I began to look into that, and I'm like, why are we treating these kids? Because God knows what I would have done with a phone if I were 12. But thank God, but that's okay. So that issue became abuse of discretion.
Yeah. On
Christmas Day, this is the only book that I know exactly when I got the moment to write it. A friend of mine, we're reaching out. She lives in Marion, Alabama. She's texting, just saying, hey. She said, I'm a little down because one of my she was telling about these two little girls in separate towns in Alabama who took their own lives, and they were 9 years old. Like, oh my God. How does a 9-year-old know how to hang themselves? Yeah. Then I hung up and I Googled bullying and child suicide. And every story that came up, if the child was 12 or older, the child was white. If the child was under 12, it was African American.
Huh.
And then learned that the suicide rate for African American kids under 12 is twice that of whites. Why is that? There's now Congressional Black Caucus is looking to the issue. Nobody can find the answers, but obviously there are things that move me. And those last three were kind of heavy. I'm so happy that I'm writing something that's not heavy. I mean, that's a different heavy. I'm writing a book with, I'm co-authoring a book right now with Dwayne Alexander Smith. And we're probably on chapter 30 of 50. And I write a chapter, he sends it to me, I send it to him, he writes a chapter and sends it back. And we have an outline, but we play off each other. And it's been really fun. It's been really a fast write. I think it's going to be fun. It's a detective series. It's a Black female. I'm writing the female. He's writing the male. They don't, unbeknownst to them, they're assigned to the same case, and whoever gets there first. And a lot of things happen. There's a lot of action. I realized that I have my strengths. He has his strength. I wrote an outline that I thought was great, and he chopped it all up and put in a lot more action. And I cannot deny that. So it's like, okay, I bow down. But then there are sometimes descriptions of things. Like he writes, our characters are in their 30s, and he says, he describes a beautiful woman looks like Pam Grier. Nobody in their 30s even knows who Pam Grier is. What are you talking about?
Wait a minute, I know who Pam Grier is.
You don't put that in.
A 30-year-old? Come on. So
that's right. That's true. I have a frozen image in my head now. Don't get me wrong, but yeah.
That's like saying, what's her face? Lola Falana.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he talks about
yes.
chapters referred to somebody describing how he looked on a CD cover. CD cover. Make it Instagram. So it's been fun, but I'm really excited about the book. It should be out this summer. It's a series. The first one's called Sound Like a Plan, Sounds Like Revenge, Sounds Like Trouble. We got like 10 titles. And,
sounds like something or other.
And that's what I'm looking. So that's my current project, and I'm also working on another standalone about a romantic suspense.
Okay. Oh, romantic suspense, always fun. All right. Well, speaking of issues, when we were emailing back and forth, Gary brought up the idea of how law enforcement and the criminal justice system is seen differently and written about differently in books by Black writers versus white writers. And can you guys talk about that a little bit? I mean, because it's certainly been an issue. We need to start thinking about it. And God knows you've all had some. I mean, your character Rachel is involved in the criminal justice system.
I mean, starting to think, we've always kind of thought about it because it's always been a thing for African Americans and people of color, writ large. We see policing as something different. It's not that we don't believe in it. It's just, don't shoot us like you don't shoot them. You can be a cop, but you can be fair too. Mm-hmm. And I know I wrote Lou the way I would want, a cop to be, someone who believes in community policing, who doesn't see the community as a they or an enemy. A cop who believes that they're there to help and to protect. I mean, serve and protect, it's a real thing. And it's odd and seeing people are starting to evaluate how cops on their pages beat people up to get answers and are just general assholes. I know I'm mentoring someone right now, and his character is a cop, and there's some instances where the cop is a jerk. And I'm like, yeah, no, we don't want to do that anymore. That's not effective. It's wrong. This guy didn't even do anything. Do you really want your cop to do this? And so this is something for him to think about. He's a white guy. For me, it's always been there. I was a kid growing up in LA. I'm an LA native. And I remember, sundown towns and trying to get out at Glendale before the sunset and not being able to drive through Beverly Hills to get to Westwood to party at, UCLA, because Beverly Hills the police will stop you. So you carry all those things into your writing and into your characters. And Yes, so it's always been a thing for us, I think. It's nothing new.
You know, I want to add to that because this whole thing is the George Floyd and all those things. I've come to understand that white America really doesn't understand it and see it the way we've experienced it. I mean, and as a woman, I've never been stopped by the police, but I remember my parents having to talk and telling my brother, you know, don't go to Torrance or to be careful and all those that you don't have to do. But I had an experience recently where I get to do a lot of books with events with lawyers because I'm an ex-lawyer. So I was doing it. The New York State Bar has a book club, and they recently read my book, Failure to Protect. And there's a scene in Failure to Protect where the police stop Dre and harass him and arrest him. And I'm having a conversation with a woman who's a smart, kind, wonderful lawyer who is like amazed that I had that chapter that, oh, did you write it before or after George Floyd? That's almost like I was clairvoyant writing that. And I had to put my temperature down and just sort of, that's our life.
Right.
I wasn't clairvoyant,
Right.
being timely with George Floyd. That happens to us. And I realized that because many whites don't experience that, they don't understand how real it is for us.
No.
And, our books are an opportunity to help them understand that. And I think I need to, and when I speak about it, I want to sort of make that clear, but you know, it was stunned that she thought I was clairvoyant.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Pamela, on that same issue, I used to work for the ACLU, and I left right when the BlackBerry came out, and there was this whole thing about privacy and the cameras and how it's an invasion of privacy, and you know, back then that made sense. But it wasn't until we had those freaking cameras on phones that folks started to believe that the world wasn't what you thought it was. And we weren't being crazy or paranoid.
Right.
This is actually happening. Here's the proof.
Well, we can go back to Rodney King. And if not for George Holliday, who received that video camera that, you know, for a birthday present or Christmas, whatever it was, right? And because the technology then was such that this thing was, you know, portable, and he just happened to be out there in his balcony as they're waving on him. He just, oh, what's going on, you know? And just the idea that surreptitious video changed the discussion then, right? Or altered the discussion, as people have said, that, oh, all of a sudden here it is, which y'all been talking about all these decades. Here it is. Here they're wailing on this man until he can't move, right? And so you're right. It is very interesting to think about where technology has arrived, and what is it, the unintended consequences, or whatever that term is, right? I mean, because I'm pretty sure that when was it Apple, whoever the heck figured out we could put cameras in these things, I don't think that was not the idea, right? The idea was selfies and, you know, capturing the moment. Well, it was capturing the moment. It's just that was not quite the moment they had in mind. So anyway, there you go. Yeah.
Occurred to them probably. And you know, one of the things that's also interesting, though, do you think that how Blacks have written about cops and the reality of their lives, how has that changed over the years? Because you read Chester Himes, and those cops are very different than Lou and your PI and that. What do you got? I mean, Gary, what do you think?
But you know, Kaufman and Engraver exist. I mean, they are brutal cops, but they exist in a Harlem, you know, that's very much of the imagination, right? It's not a real Harlem, right? It's Chester Himes' version of Harlem, because Himes himself didn't spend that much time in Harlem. And yes, they certainly exist in a kind of strange stasis. That if you took that same, I mean, you could take you certainly take the absurdist, weird plots of his and do those, but you're right, you really couldn't do Kaufman and Engraver the way he did them then, right? I mean, there would be a lot of blowback. There'd be a lot of pushback. But then just to the point too, that also says you can't just have what you still see on TV, you know, cops roughing up the suspect, because the fiction then is the suspect they're roughing up, we've seen that suspect do something terrible, right? We've seen that suspect do something bad or something disgusting. So it's okay. So we buy into it that it's okay that he roughs him up, right? That it's okay that he does this to get the information from him or whatever it is, right? Because the bomb's about to go off, like in 24, right? When Jack Bauer would torture some poor bastard to get the find out where the bomb is. So because that's such a weird flip of how it really works, right? Of how it really happens. Just real quick, when Fruitvale Station came out several years ago, which was about the shooting of that unarmed black man in was it Oakland? I guess it was in the the BART on the BART platform. My son, who's like 34 now, he's 34 now, and he's tall. He's about 6'2.5". He's tatted up. His voice is louder than mine, deeper than mine, if you can believe it. And I could not emotionally nor intellectually get any distance to go watch Fruitvale Station for like a year, because that could be my son and his buddies out one night, and that happens. I could not. There was no way to divorce myself from that kind of reality, because that was too real. That was absolutely like that could happen. And finally I saw it, but I could never watch it on the big screen because I knew I would be devastated. I knew I'd be destroyed. But the idea that you could take this thing that really happened and capture it, in a fictionalized way, but nonetheless capture it and talk about the consequences of it, and show this young man who was just a guy trying to make his way. It just, it was just too much. It was powerful, just powerful.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to me, having read Paula Woods, Nora Deloche, A.L. Herbert, who's also very cozy, doesn't really deal much with cops at all. And then, we get people like, Paula Woods, who, of course, the Charlotte Justice, she wrote, that's stories about, a cop during the unrest and all that. A lot of people sometimes think African Americans are a monolith, that you all think alike, that you're a monolith, that black people all think alike. Yeah, I can see your eyes rolling. I know well.
Y'all are all very stylish.
Yeah. Well,
there you go. There's that one.
I could. Well, never mind. She's not going to go there. But there are differences among the different black crime writers in their styles. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that too?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I can compare and contrast, but I want to say that, of course, there are.
Yeah.
But there are differences between white writers, and of course there are.
Right.
And white, so I think the perception that we should be writing the same is a foundational problem.
Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up.
Right.
Because,
so I mean, we're different people. We're different experiences with different parts of the country. I've been reading biographies a lot lately, and one of the most constant and I didn't know much about Chester Himes' life. And you think about the Himes and Langston Hughes and Baldwin, who left this country.
Yeah,
they couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah,
and all of that colors their writing, and these are like amazing writers.
Yes.
I mean,
Booker T. Washington versus W. Du Bois.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I want the people watching this watching this interview, what we're doing, this gathering, to walk away from it and recognize that we all are different. And while no one would expect a group of 10 white writers to have the same experience, you shouldn't expect a group of 10 black writers to have the same
Absolutely not.
Right, yeah. And once again, the different black experience that makes writing even more right, because you don't even need conflict without the race. You have it inside the race. I mean, like I just said, Booker T. Washington versus, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps versus the W.B. Du Bois type, they were constantly like that. I mean,
Right.
Boys in the Hood, there's a scene where, you know, a black cop stops Ice Cube and his friends, and, you know, there's discussion there.
Right.
And that makes, once again, for great drama, because now, you know, you have to recognize for your characters that we are not all the same, that we all come from different places. I have Black Republicans in my family, and, you know, how did that happen? But they come from things differently.
Yep.
And as a writer, that's great stuff, because good story has lots of conflict in it, and there's nothing better than conflict within the family, within.
All right. And I want to bring this up because I think this is an interesting point. What is it about the mystery thriller genre that makes it such a good genre for talking about issues like this? You know, I've learned more about Black culture from Barbara Neely than I did reading W.E.B. Du Bois. I hate to say it, but, you know, and so what is it about that genre that says, hey, I can be who I am and I can share that with other people?
I think people relate to crime. I mean, that's why they're like 163 Law and Order SUVs. You know, it's the same thing with Jesus telling parables. People are able to see themselves in these stories because we've all, if you haven't directly had crime, and I don't know how that would happen if you live in especially big cities, but all either experienced it or know someone who has, even if it's someone just stealing your coffee creamer out of the freaking refrigerator at work. We've all been there. And I think it's, you know, people long for those stories because they long for answers. I know that's why I write it, because I'm trying to figure things out myself.
There you go. But I agree. I think, and maybe, you know, to belabor the metaphor a bit, you know, it is also the mystery of the human condition. Circling back for one quick second, and not to belabor us into a whole bunch of politics, but I am fascinated, for instance, to Rachel's point about Black Republicans, I am fascinated by the fact that more Black men voted for Trump this time than last time, right?
Right.
So, right, now how is that? And on the events of January 6th, there were actually a number of Black folks there. So it is fascinating. It is, I mean, it's hard to get my head around it, but it does say, man, this is very fascinating. I mean, you know, talk about people being complex, people being how they arrive and how they arrive at. I mean, so it goes to the point about the human condition is so interesting and strange, and the mystery in crime fiction, I think, allows us, because we have characters who step out of line, we have characters who are trying to restore order, you have characters who are, you know, all across, you know, that spectrum. And so I think in that way, it helps us then to get to showing people bad, good, in between, forced into a corner, etc. And just that panoply of the human condition.
Pam, do you want to weigh in quickly? Because I've got one more quick question, and then we got to open it up. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys mentioned Black Republicans, and I just came out of the closet, and I have not recovered yet. I'm sorry. Next question. I got to get back to myself. I'm being honest.
Okay, now Pamela,
Brings back bad memories.
All right, you already sort of told us a little bit about what's coming up next for you, but I want to put a twist on it. How's the pandemic affecting that?
You know, after I made a decision after about 6 months that I was not going to turn on CNN and get sucked in, because, and then you go with it, out it for 3 days, and you turn on and go, he did what? I've come to, I know there's been no CNN on here, and so I do better when I don't get sucked in. If I need something, I take my Rachel Maddow in 1 hour doses. And I do like Morning Joe. I tape it. It comes on. Sometimes I get up at 3 a.m. to watch it. Sometimes I tape it. But those are my two go-tos. And then I have friends who I say, please don't call me. I don't want to know anything. Then they text me. So if anything big happens, Charlene, you're out there. I know she'll call me. It's, you know, I have, my parents are both 89 years old, and they're healthy and trying to keep them and active. So I worry about them. My dad, gardener, he still cuts people's lawns, and he insists he's not giving that up, and he wears his mask. So I worried about them. But in terms of my writing, I spent all this money decorating my office at home, and it's beautiful, and it's gold walls, and then I got to come here to write. So whatever. But I've probably written in more in the last 3 months than I wrote before that. So I'm getting back on track. But really, the political news and the pandemic, I felt like something weighing me down, and I did not write as much as I thought I would have, or I should have.
Gary, how is the pandemic affecting what you write? And tell us a little bit about what that is.
Well, fortunately, I had going into the pandemic, I had a book contract which didn't get pulled back because I guess some things got in publishing got upended because of the pandemic, and so that helped me have a routine, right? So that I could get up and it was a longer story about the routine around this place, but anyway, it helped me to have that routine that every day I knew I had to get up and when I'm working on a book, I meet my quota. Sometimes I meet the quota in a couple hours, and sometimes it takes all doggone day because I'm like every word I'm like chiseling it in stone. It's like the Flintstones, man. It's like, what the heck? Come on, really? How is it that I'm doing this as a living? And so that helped. And then I had some other stuff and I had a few short stories. So, in fact, more direct to the question. But anyway, so that helped me keep my head down. Now, unlike Pam, you're right. I still watch, CNN and MSNBC at night, which probably is not a good idea because you're right. It just makes, now it's a little calmer, but just makes that, your head spin. And then, I drink a bit. So I watch CNN and MSNBC and I'm drinking a little bit. So it kind of all works out. All worked out. Because then Grandpa's knocked out about 9 or 9:30. So it's all good. Right? All works out. But a friend of mine put together, an anthology, and so it was about life during the pandemic, and I thought, well, okay, I don't want to just write about the pandemic or the pandemic as it is now. I want to, being inspired, also as a kid, being inspired by the original Twilight Zone episodes. I want to do it like there was a great old Twilight Zone, among the great old Twilight Zone episodes called The Midnight Sun. And as Louise Nettleton, I can see it now, and she can't. It's the New York is something has happened, right? The sun has gone online, whatever's happened, and New York is just like slowly burning up, and everybody's sweating all the time, right? They're sweating in the day, they're sweating at night. There's no cold to be found, right? It's just hot, hot, hot. And then, of course, the reveal is that in the end, she does have a fever, but it's the reverse, right? This is before the term climate change, climate warming, but it's totally cold. It's bitterly, bitterly cold, and everybody's freezing. Nobody can get warm. And I thought, well, I want to riff on that. And so then to excise this, right? To excise that pandemic demon. I wrote a short story where the reverse is that you can't, now we have to be 6 feet, in the mask and isolated. This pandemic is that you have to be in a crowd. you can't be isolated. You have to be around people. And of course it drives you insane because you're always around people. So to excise all that was my pandemic story, and I'm done. And I suppose though, we should hear Rachel weigh in.
I want Rachel to weigh in.
When you're writing, but now as we're writing in 2021 and 2022, it does seem you're going to have to refer to it, even if it's just in the past, right? That we did go through this period.
All right, Rachel. So how's the pandemic affecting what you're writing, and what are you writing?
Well, it's been crazy because my day job, I'm a writer for Cedars-Sinai. So on March 13th, when Left Coast Crime was canceled, I drove from San Diego straight to Beverly Hills to Cedars, where I wrote crisis communications every day,
That's
even
wow.
on weekends until
Amazing.
June. It was exhausting because, we're all at home, and I was very good about separating my work life, my day job life from my novel hustle. And now it's all scrunched out. I usually write during my commute, and that was gone. So it was initially difficult, but I managed to sell 2 books during that time. So that was
Amazing.
Great.
I am looking for it's a weird word, but so much wrong has happened for people during this pandemic. And as crime writers, we are constantly looking for those things to write about.
Right.
And with people being smushed together in their houses, there are angry people. There are angry men with their wives and their kids. And there's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of all kind of things. I mean, people are stealing unemployment checks from jail. So
That's right.
it's once again, crime writers and mystery writers will have this bounty of things to write about that, since February 2020. And we have to. I mean, there's some writers, more literary fiction writers, who are like, I will not touch the pandemic. And it's like, oh, that's our job. On the human condition. And for us to not acknowledge the disparity in healthcare, and how some people are dying more than others, and kids, Pam's writing about suicides, young kids, kids are committing suicide now, and that's why they're trying to rush them back in school. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to address in our books. And once again, that's our job. And one of the books that I sold during the pandemic is coming out in August. It's called These Toxic Things. And I find I'm writing a lot about memory and family secrets, because now this is a moment I'm doing like lots of projects at home where I'm going through cabinets with old stuff that I haven't seen in 15 years. And your parents are getting older, and you're learning some things that they hadn't told you. And it's like, what? And so I'm finding like a lot of my story ideas are surrounded by memories, and what you thought was real and thought was true are not. So yeah,
that's a fun thing to play with too.
Yeah.
All righty, Christine, do we have some questions? You're muted, dear.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful program.
Okay. Anyway, so do we have any questions?
Yes, you do. You have questions. Everybody is saying thank you very much. It was a wonderful program. There's a question for Gary. Will Matt Henson be a series?
Well, I believe both Pamela and Rachel talked to this. It is about moving them units, and hopefully, I haven't seen the sales figures yet, and the book got delayed. The book was supposed to come out in February, then the pandemic and blah blah blah. But it actually worked out better than it came out in November. So yes, I mean the short answer is yes. One form or another, there will be another Matthew Henson story. In fact, it actually might be in the form of a graphic novel, the second outing, and then I go back to prose for the third outing. At least it's that's a bit of a vague little plan at the moment. That certainly may get derailed. But yes, hopefully there'll be, for sure there'll be a second one. I don't know if there'll be a third one, but there'll certainly be a second one. And certainly I'm going to move them up in time a little bit. Like I said, we start in 28. So, we'll probably jump to like 31 or 32. So, the crash has happened. The Great Depression is on, but Henson will be in motion.
Okay, next question.
That's good. The next question is Rachel. Will your next be a standalone?
Yes, they're all going to be standalones until, I get real Hollywood money and they're like, or another Gray. Until then, yes, they're all going to be standalones. But that's great because I get to do weird and wonderful things with story.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, some attendee said that it was so glad to do a panel with Rachel at Left Coast Crime before we were shut down. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about Left Coast Crime.
Left Coast Crime is it was every year. It honors and celebrates writers who live west of the Mississippi, right?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last March, it was my first time being honored with and nominated for a book award, and I was a guest of honor, and all these wonderful things that finally kind of happened for me. And of course, on brand, it was canceled. So.
Oh God,
Yeah.
it was horrible. I was there also. We're all, I'm actually getting some traction with some fans and everything.
But I did get to meet Oline Kajal, who
There you go. There you go.
love and who's such a champion of all of us.
Exactly.
So thank you, Oline.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, do you all realize, all the attendees, that all of these authors' books are in the Pasadena Public Library? When you signed up today for the program, it referred you back to our catalog, and you could see the library holdings on these authors as well. And so I encourage you to check out their books and enjoy them. They sound absolutely fascinating.
And after you've checked them out, please come back and buy them.
So then go to
We
Romans.
like eating, guys. Come on.
Yes, go to Romans. Yes, it's a very difficult for writers right now to sell their books. I'm sure it's exceptionally hard.
It's never been easy. Let me put it that way.
That's it. That's right.
But I think that's one of the results of the pandemic. Do you think that too, that it's more difficult to sell your books or to reach out to television to produce your book in a miniseries or make it into a movie? Or do you think that's just typical?
I think
there's
the
nothing
pandemic
different.
has actually helped us reach more readers, because I'm getting to meet people that I would have never, my publisher would have never sent me to North Carolina to do an event.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's been a beneficial thing.
Yeah. For me too. It's been a little bit better, but it's still tough no matter what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the advantage of these Zoom programs is that we can all sit in our homes and reach everybody throughout the world. So do you think that's going to continue? Do you think that's a good thing?
Yeah,
Really?
I think we're going to see more hybrid meetings.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
already trying to figure that out for Sisters in Crime.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Sisters in Crime chapter.
I've still been doing a lot of book clubs by Zoom, but I can't wait to reconnect.
Yeah.
I really can't.
Are you kidding? When we start reconnecting, I'm going to be hugging so many people. It's going to be and Louise, Bannon, #me too. That's it.
Right.
I can't wait to get back in a hotel room with Food Network and my pens and papers all over the comforter. I'm looking
There you go.
Rachel, you handwrite?
Yeah, my first draft is always handwritten.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I love
Wow.
Do that. I could
it. I
never do
love
it.
it.
I used to do it.
Much respect. Much respect.
And do you type it up or does somebody else type it up?
No, I type it up and then I print it out and then I make edits and then I type it back in again.
Whoa.
Yeah, I could never read my writing if I wrote it out. So.
Yeah.
I was that kid who loved handwriting.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna name drop. I'm gonna name drop because he's long gone, but he was a lovely man. It was a guy named Millard Kaufman who I got to be friends with later in life. And Millard was a Hollywood screenwriter. I guess his most famous screenplay was Bad Day at Black Rock. And I think until, I guess Millard was 94, 95. Well, he finally published his first novel in 92. But Millard, to the day he passed, because he was still working on screenplays, would hand wrote all the screenplays. He sent it. I think the woman who at least for years and years formatted his scripts was older than Millard. And but that he wrote all the scripts in longhand.
Yeah. No, I started out writing longhand, but
Did you?
the processor made my life so much easier.
Yeah.
I tell you what I have been doing that's a pandemic benefit is I've discovered Otter, which is a voice dictation app. So typically when I'm out walking in the morning, I will record it in a voice memo in my phone. It's a crappy chapter.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's all in Anyway.
Oh, that's great.
Then I get home and I upload it, they transcribe it, and then I edit that. And that has been really cool. I've been doing that a lot on the book that I'm working on with Dwayne.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
And it's a free app. So you
Yeah.
get 600 minutes a month free. And
Wow.
I haven't exhausted my 600 minutes.
Dig it.
So do you have an idea where your books are going when you started? You know, you
Yes.
start with the outline and you know what kind of the beginning is and the end is? Or do you?
Yeah, I always start with an outline. An outline can take me a month of just playing around and moving around. And, you know, the book that the standalone romantic suspense that I'm working on now, I wrote 3,000 words yesterday. And I'm like, this is really good. And I'm like really happy. And I get up this morning and I have a focus group reader and I heard her voice saying, you know, I don't really want to root for any of these characters. I like women who are kind of evil. She's my main character and nobody's probably going to like her. So I softened her a little bit this morning and you know, so I went back and so but I know what's going to happen at the end. You know, halfway through that may change because I will never forget my first book deal, and I'm so excited and I get the editorial letter from the publisher editor, and she tells me to change my ending. For a week, I walk around the house, I'm distraught. My life is over. My writing career is gonna suck. And my then husband was tired. He said, "Why don't you just try to write the way they want and see what you think?" So I did, and like instantly going, "Oh my gosh, she's right." Because you know, I had somebody getting away with 2 murders, right? So it's like, nah. I mean, as a new writer, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she was so right. So I'm not afraid to change. Let it go where it needs to go. But I generally know what's going to happen.
Yeah. The outline is just a guide. You know, I outline too, but if something actually happens where I'm like, no, that didn't happen, because you don't know these people. I always tell my agent who asks for outlines, I'm like, this is what it is, but I don't know these people. I don't know what motivate them to do. It may not be her in the end because I don't know these people. But the wonderful thing about outlines, you can discover and still have that safety net and you can come back to it. So yeah, getting to know them people, that's a very important thing.
That's good. Good
that's
point.
like, for me, that's like the third draft when it's like, oh, I know them and she wouldn't do that. Yeah.
So what about the covers of your books? Gary talked a little bit about the artist designing his graphic novels. What do you work with your publisher about the cover, or does the cover always turn out how you want it, or do you have an input on that?
I do. I asked for my agent asked for input with my contracts. So I'm very much into covers do matter. I know I look at covers, and if it's janky, then I may not buy it. But I like it. And for Now She's Gone, they did a great job with capturing, covering over who she is, or maybe not covering over, maybe peeling away who she is. It's about the identity. So we work very closely, even with Thomas and Mercer, who's now my publisher for the next one. I work very closely with the designer and editor to make sure that what I'm writing comes across well on the cover.
And that's very important. What about you, Pamela?
And I had really traumatic experiences with covers when I was with the publisher. My last several books have been independently published, very happily, and audio as well. And I have a cover designer that I found on Upwork. He's in Croatia. Never met him. He's probably 1/10 of the price of what I'd pay for the same cover in here. And I typically will spend a lot of time looking at images, and then if I find an image I like, I say, okay, then here you mystery it up, and after a few rounds, it works out.
Particularly for the Matthew Henson cover, since it's a retro pulp novel, I did emphasize to the publisher that it has to have that kind of look, it has to have that kind of feel, which it really did. I mean, it really did a great job, I thought, of capturing that with this guy named Charles Regan, who did the cover. And years ago, when I was published by Kensington, I had a wonderful editor there named Karen Thomas, and this is when I first did the first Martha Cheney book, and it was like, as they used to say, a hard soft deal. So it came out in hardback first, and I really didn't like the cover at all. It was just, anyway, I really didn't like the cover. And she actually asked me, though. She said, well, what do you think about the cover? So I told her what I thought about the cover. And sure enough, for the paperback and then the subsequent next novel, they got a different artist and different designer, and they really did it up lovely. But it goes to show you that if you have a good relationship with the editor, and the editor has, will go to bat for you, because otherwise, you're right. I mean, you sometimes will just have to suffer the cover you get.
Yeah, there are horror stories.
Yeah.
I remember being at a conference, and there were several New York Times. This was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Several New York Times bestselling authors, and only one of them had cover control, and that was Sandra Brown.
Yeah.
It's done. I mean, she has complete cover control.
Amazing. Yeah.
If you're selling that many books, I guess you get what you want.
That's right. Sure.
All righty.
Thank you so much. This was a fabulous presentation. It was wonderful to meet all of you today. And I encourage everyone to go to our library catalog and check out your books and enjoy them, and also to purchase the books. You can go to Romans in Pasadena and purchase them. And I thank you very much. Are there other places that you recommend to purchase your books, or?
Well, yeah.
Romans is a good place.
Yeah, I like small.
Essewan, any independents, Chevalier's, all the independents, yeah.
Yeah.
I just heard about another one on Manchester. Oh, what was the name of that place? Sorry, I forgot it. But yeah.
Oh, and there's a new bookstore in Culver City, of all things. They opened during the pandemic, called The Village Well. Yeah.
Yes. That's what I was thinking about. I thought it was actually on Manchester.
Yeah, no, it's in Culver City.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's also Malik's is now in Fox Hills Mall. Oh, I
There
just
you
saw
go.
my Westfield, Culver City.
Exactly, but it's still Fox Hills Mall.
You're
That's all right.
dating yourself.
That's all right. No, it's all right. No, I've had that argument with the editor. I said, no. It ain't nobody call it Westfield. No, ain't nobody call it that. No.
Yeah, I remember that place.
Yeah, nobody calls it
There
that.
in a
Thank
while.
you very much. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to the program before we sign off and say?
No, I just want to thank
Wonderful.
everybody
We've
for
got
coming.
all of your email addresses in the chat. We will put them in the email addresses when we do the YouTube. So I encourage everybody to go to Pasadena Public Library YouTube and share it on your social media sites. And we can't thank you enough for presenting our first Black History program for the month of February.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right. Toodaloo.
All right.
So much. Nice to meet all of you.
Same
Bye-bye.
here. All right, y'all.
Right.